Marilyn Price fined me $4,800 for standing on land my family had owned for generations. I came home to bury my grandfather and sleep one last night in his old pine cabin. Instead, I found an HOA sign bolted to my gate, claiming my road, my lake trail, and my pasture. Marilyn Price smiled like the ridge belonged to her. But before you judge me, watch what happened when I opened Silas Mercer's survey box. And if you like stories where quiet men stand on truth, subscribe and stay with me. I came back to my grandfather's ranch with a funeral receipt in my glove box, 12 hours of highway dust on my truck, and no plan past unlocking the cabin door. Silas Mercer had left me 1,200 acres in western Wyoming, a spring-fed lake tucked below the North Ridge, a weathered barn leaning into the wind, and more unpaid bills than I wanted to count. I expected silence. I expected grief. I expected one last night inside his old pine cabin before I figured out whether I had to sell the place just to bury him right. What I did not expect was a white metal sign bolted across my wooden gate. Silver Pines. Oh. A community authority authorized access-only ranch road, lake trail, and north pasture, subject to HOA oversight. I stopped the truck so hard the rear tires spit gravel. For a few seconds, I just stared through the windshield. That gate had my grandfather's brand burned into the crossbeam, a crooked M inside a circle. I had helped him repaint it when I was 13. Now somebody had drilled HOA nonsense into the wood, like they owned the memory too. I stepped out, boots hitting dry dirt, and walked up to the sign. Fresh bolts, fresh paint, fresh arrogance. That was when the white SUV rolled in behind me. It was spotless, the kind of vehicle that had never hauled feed, never hit mud, never carried anything heavier than shopping bags. The driver's door opened, and a woman in designer boots stepped onto my grandfather's road, like she had been waiting for this scene her whole life. "You must be the grandson," she said. I turned slowly. Wade Mercer. She did not offer her hand. She looked past me at my truck, then at the cabin roof beyond the gate, then back at the mud on my jeans. "Marilyn Price," she said, "president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association. I was hoping we could handle this before it became unpleasant." I looked at the sign again. Unpleasant for who? Her smile tightened. "For you, Mr. Mercer. Your vehicle is blocking a community access corridor. That truck also violates exterior visibility standards. And this gate is not approved under our emergency route policy." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my grandfather had been dead 3 days, and this woman was standing on his land, telling me my grief was non-compliant. "This is private ranch property," I said. "My grandfather owned it." "Owned," she corrected, with the kind of softness people use when they want a knife to slide in clean. Past tense. The surrounding development has operated under community authority for decades. Your grandfather was difficult about that, but the board has been patient. Patient. Silas Mercer had spent his last years alone up here, keeping fences mended and the lake dam clear by hand, while the houses below glittered at night like they had grown out of his soil. He never talked much about Silver Pines. When I asked as a kid, he just said, "Some people build close to land and start believing they made it." Marilyn pulled a folded paper from her clipboard and held it out. I did not take it. She raised one eyebrow. "This is your formal notice, $4,800 in accumulated community access fees, plus daily penalties if the truck, the gate, and the unauthorized livestock fencing are not corrected within 72 hours. "There's no livestock," I said. "Then removal should be simple." The wind moved through the dry grass behind her. Down the slope, beyond the pines, I could see the roofs of Silver Pines subdivision shining in the afternoon sun. Big houses, smooth driveways, A clubhouse near the lake trail my grandfather used to walk before his knees gave out. You put that sign on my gate? I asked. The board authorized it. Did the board bring a deed? Her smile finally disappeared. I beg your pardon? A deed, I said. Recorded easement, court order, something that says you have the right to bolt signs to my grandfather's gate. Marilyn gave a small laugh, but it had no humor in it. Men like you always think paperwork is a shield. The community has recognized authority here. Your grandfather understood that, even if he resented it. Then show me the document. She stepped closer, perfume sharp against the dust and pine. Listen carefully, Mr. Mercer. Lonely men with old papers do not win against organized communities. They get fined, leaned, and removed. That word sat between us. Removed. I looked at the fine notice in her hand, then at the HOA sign, then at the road stretching past the gate toward the cabin where Silas had died, believing nobody would fight for him. You have 72 hours, Marilyn said. After that, I call the sheriff. I took the paper then, not because I accepted it, because evidence should always be kept clean. She smiled like she had mistaken my silence for fear. Then she turned, climbed into her SUV, and backed down the road without looking at the gate again. I stood there until the dust settled. The ranch went quiet, but it was not the quiet I had come looking for. It was the kind of quiet that waits before a rifle shot, before a storm, before a man decides what he is willing to lose. Inside the cabin, the air smelled like old coffee, cedar walls, and dust. Silas's hat still hung by the door. His boots sat under the bench, toes pointed out like he might come back from the pasture any minute. I set Marilyn's fine notice on the kitchen table beside the funeral bill. Then I saw the gray metal survey box under the far window. It had been there since I was a boy. Silas never let anyone touch it. Not my father, not county men, not me. Across the lid, in his blocky handwriting, were 3 faded words. Mercer Land Records. I crouched beside it and ran my thumb over the latch. The metal was cold. The lock was old. And for the first time since I had arrived, I felt something other than grief. I felt the shape of a question. Why would an HOA dare find the man who inherited the ground beneath them? The answer was somewhere in that box, and it had not been opened in 30 years. The lock did not want to give. I found the key taped under the drawer of Silas's roll-top desk, exactly where he used to hide spare tractor keys and fishing permits. The brass was dark with age, but it turned after one hard twist, and the lid lifted with a metal groan that sounded too loud in the cabin. Inside was not junk. It was order. Folders tied with cotton string, survey notebooks, county tax receipts, hand-drawn boundary maps wrapped in wax paper. My grandfather had labeled everything in black pencil, with the kind of careful print a man uses when he expects someone to question him one day. I pulled the top folder free. Mercer Ranch, Original Plat, 1958. The paper cracked softly when I opened it. The map showed the ridge, the old dam road, the spring lake, the north pasture, and the strip of land where silver pines now sat like a clean row of expensive mistakes. Red lines marked the original 1,200-acre boundary. Blue pencil marked roads and drainage paths. Then I saw the note. Silas had written it across the margin in his steady hand. Surface use is not ground ownership. I read it once, then again. Under that note was a second line, smaller. Developer gets passage. Mercer keeps ground. My pulse slowed, not from calm, but from focus. I had grown up hearing that Silas had been stubborn, old-fashioned, bad with money. My father used to say Grandpa could have sold that mountain and died rich, but instead, he kept a piece of land nobody respected. Looking at that map, I started to wonder if Silas had not been poor because he was foolish. Maybe he had been poor because somebody had been waiting him out. I spread more papers across the table. The cabin lamp threw yellow light over signatures, stamps, parcel numbers, and old legal descriptions. One document referenced Silver Pines Development Company. Another mentioned road access, drainage maintenance, and lake trail usage. None of them said sale. None of them said transfer. They all used the same careful word. Use. Temporary use, limited use, surface use. Outside, rain started tapping the tin roof. The sound sharpened the silence inside the cabin. I found a folded sheet tucked into the back of the plat. It was not typed. It was Silas's handwriting again, dated 15 years earlier. If they ever claim the ridge, pull Book 42, page 318 at the county. Do not argue at the gate. Do not trust their maps. Check renewal. Check renewal. That was when my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mr. Mercer?" Marilyn Price said, her voice smooth and awake, like she had been waiting for the light in the cabin to come on. "I hope you're using these 72 hours wisely." I looked at the spread of maps. I opened my grandfather's records. A pause. Short, but there. "Old records can confuse people," she said, "especially grieving people. You put a sign on my gate. The board did. You fined me for standing on land my family owns. You inherited a cabin," she said coldly, "not authority over a modern community." I slid the 1958 plat closer. The red line ran straight beneath the road her SUV had used that afternoon. "Then why does your community road cross my grandfather's original boundary?" Her breathing changed. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to advise you not to start making legal interpretations you're not qualified to make. I'm not interpreting anything yet." "Good," she said, "because tomorrow morning, deputies will be coming by to clarify your status. I suggest you have whatever paperwork you think matters ready." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to rain hit the roof and water drip from the gutter outside Silas's kitchen window. Marilyn had not called to warn me. She had called to measure how much I knew. That told me enough. I gathered the plat, the handwritten note, the access documents, and the page marked Book 42, page 318. I placed them in a folder and wrote one word across the front. Gate. Then I set Marilyn's $4,800 fine beside it. For the first time since I had come home, the cabin did not feel empty. It felt like Silas was still there, standing behind my shoulder, waiting to see whether I had enough backbone to follow the paper trail he left. At sunrise, gravel cracked outside. 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up the ranch road, and behind them, parked just beyond the gate, was Marilyn Price's white SUV. I stepped onto the porch with the folder under my arm before anyone knocked. The morning had that hard Wyoming cold that makes every sound carry, and the crunch of boots on gravel reached me before the deputies did. The first man up the steps was older, broad through the shoulders, with a tan hat pulled low and mud-dried along the edge of his pant legs. His badge read Ralston. "Wade Mercer?" he asked. "That's me. Sheriff Tom Ralston." His eyes moved past me into the cabin, then back to my hands. "We got a call about a property access dispute." Marilyn came around the cruiser before I could answer. She had changed clothes since yesterday, but the clipboard was the same. So was the smile. "It is not a dispute, Sheriff," she said. "Mr. Mercer is occupying a restricted community corridor without authorization. He refused compliance yesterday and made hostile statements regarding HOA authority." I looked at Ralston. I asked her for a deed. Marilyn's smile thinned. He was aggressive. Ralston did not react. That told me he had done this before. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "do you have paperwork showing your right to be here?" I handed him the deed transfer, Silas's death certificate, the county parcel sheet, and the 1958 plat. He read standing on the porch, one page at a time, while Marilyn shifted her weight behind him. The deputy beside the second cruiser watched the gate. His body language changed when he saw the HOA sign bolted into the wood. Ralston reached the plat and paused. "This is old." "So is the ranch," I said. Marilyn stepped forward. "Sheriff, with respect, those documents do not address modern community integration standards." Ralston looked at her over the paper. "That a legal term?" "It is board terminology." "That's not what I asked." For the first time since she arrived, Marilyn shut her mouth. Ralston handed the deed back to me but kept looking at the plat. "Your grandfather owned the full tract? According to every page I've found. And you inherited it?" "Yes." He turned toward Marilyn. "Then why was I told he was trespassing?" Her chin lifted. "Because Silver Pines has maintained access rights across this corridor for decades. Mr. Mercer cannot simply appear after years of neglect and destabilize a residential community." "I appeared because my grandfather died," I said. That landed harder than I expected. Even the deputy by the cruiser looked down. Marilyn did not blink. Ralston folded the plat carefully and passed it back. "I'm not removing him from land he appears to own. If the HOA has a recorded easement, court order, or valid instrument, bring it to the county attorney." "We have bylaws," Marilyn snapped. "Bylaws don't outrank a deed." The silence after that was short, but sharp. Marilyn's face flushed. "Sheriff, you are making a serious mistake. This man has already interfered with community access. There are families below this ridge who depend on that road, the lake trail, and the drainage basin." Ralston looked toward the road past my gate. "Are any of those facilities inside the HOA plat?" Marilyn hesitated. It was barely a second. But I saw it. Ralston saw it too. "That will need to be established in civil court," she said. "Then establish it there," he replied. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. "I will." Ralston stepped off the porch and motioned for the deputy to return to the cruiser. Marilyn stayed where she was, staring at me with a kind of cold focus that had nothing to do with rules anymore. When Ralston reached his door, I followed him down. "Sheriff," I said quietly, "has she done this before?" He glanced toward Marilyn's SUV. "Marilyn Price has been president of Silver Pines for 11 years. She likes fines, liens, strong letters. Most people don't fight because fighting costs money." "I don't have money, no," he said. "But you may have land. That scares people more." He opened his cruiser door, then paused. "Keep your paperwork together. Don't threaten her. Don't touch that sign until you talk to someone who knows land law. And if she sends people up here, record everything." That was not legal advice. It was better. It was a warning from a man who had watched Marilyn win too many times. The cruisers backed down the road. Marilyn waited until they were gone before walking toward me. She stopped close enough that I could see the small crack in her polished sunglasses. "You think that went well for you?" she asked. "I think the sheriff read the deed. Lonely men with old papers usually mistake delay for victory." I said nothing. She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Your grandfather wasted his life guarding dirt nobody wanted. Do not make the same mistake." Then she turned and walked back to her SUV. I watched her leave, but my mind was already somewhere else. Book 42, page 318, County Records. If Marilyn wanted a paper war, I needed the oldest paper in the county. I locked the cabin, put Silas's folder on the passenger seat, and drove toward town before the dust from her Range Rover had even settled. The county records office sat behind the courthouse, plain brick, narrow windows, and the smell of paper that had outlived half the men who signed it. I walked in with Silas's folder under my arm and Marilyn's fine notice folded in my back pocket like a dare. The clerk at the front desk looked at the name on my request form and paused. "Mercer Ranch?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes shifted toward a back office. "You'll want Eli." 5 minutes later, Eli Booker came out with a limp in his step and a pencil behind one ear. He was thin, gray-bearded, and carried himself like a man who trusted survey stakes more than people. "You Silas's grandson?" he asked. "Wade." He held my eyes a second longer than polite. "Your grandfather was the best boundary man this county ever had. Mean with a transit, meaner with a dishonest developer." That was the first kind thing anyone in town had said about Silas. I opened the folder on the counter. He left a note. Book 42, page 318. Eli did not move for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Come with me." He led me into the archive room, past shelves of deed books and plat binders, to a cabinet with drawers so heavy they groaned when he pulled one open. He removed a leather-bound volume and set it on a table beneath a yellow lamp. Book 42. He turned pages slowly, careful with the corners, until he reached page 318. There it was. Surface Use and Ground Reservation Agreement. Mercer Ranch and Silver Pines Development Company. Filed June 3, 1958. I felt the room narrow around those words. Eli tapped the page. "This is the one nobody likes to talk about." I read fast, then slower when the language started making my pulse hit harder. The developer had not bought the land beneath the North Ridge improvements. He had leased surface use rights from Silas Mercer for roads, drainage works, utility corridors, and lake access. 50 years, renewable only by written agreement, recorded with the county before expiration. 50 years from 1958, I said. Expired in 2008, Eli replied. There was a temporary extension filed in 2009. 15 years. I looked up. Eli turned 2 more pages and pointed to the extension. Signed by Silas, he said. Extended through last spring. No renewal after that. The words hit like a hammer dropped on a courtroom table. Last spring. 3 years ago, according to the outline I carried in my head from Silas's note, but now Eli's records made it sharper. The final extension had expired 3 years before Silas died, and nobody had renewed it. What happens if they didn't renew? I asked. Eli looked toward the archive door, then back at me. You need an attorney for the clean answer. I'm asking for the county answer. He slid his finger down the page to a paragraph near the bottom. If renewal is not recorded within 60 days of expiration, all surface improvements described herein, including roads, drainage works, lake access paths, common maintenance parcels, and utility corridors, shall revert to the Mercer estate for control, maintenance, or removal at owner discretion. My mouth went dry. That means the road? I asked. The North Ridge Road. The lake trail? Yes. The drainage basin? Yes. He hesitated. What else? I asked. Eli pulled a modern Silver Pines plat from another drawer and laid it beside the 1958 agreement. He aligned the boundary lines with a ruler, pencil moving from old paper to new. The clubhouse parcel touches it here. The emergency water easement crosses it here. And this addition. He stopped, then circled a rectangular shape on a residential lot near the ridge. That looks like Marilyn Price's house. I stared at the pencil circle. Her house? Part of it, Eli said. The luxury wing they added 5 years back. Sunroom, garage extension, retaining wall, built over the restricted Mercer utility corridor if this overlay is accurate. The woman who had called my truck trash had built part of her own house on ground my grandfather never gave away. I took out my phone and photographed the page, then the book cover, then the file number. Eli did not stop me. "You'll want certified copies," he said. "All of it." "How long?" He was already walking to the copier. "For Silas Mercer's grandson, 20 minutes. While the machine warmed up, my phone buzzed. "Marilyn." I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text came through. "Do not interfere with HOA maintenance zones. Board review pending." I looked at the agreement on the table, the reversion clause under Eli's finger, and for the first time since I found that sign on my gate, I almost smiled. Then another notification popped up. "Motion alert. Dam road camera." I opened the feed. The camera showed two men in hooded jackets under weak moonlight, dragging survey stakes through wet grass near the dam road. One of them turned his face toward the lens. I did not know the second man, but the first was easy to recognize from the Silver Pines website. Victor Lane, HOA treasurer. Eli leaned over my shoulder and saw the footage. His jaw tightened. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like they know what you found." I saved the video, backed it up, and slid the certified copies into Silas's folder. The paper war had started, and Marilyn had just sent her first soldiers to move the line. I drove back to the ranch with the certified copies on the passenger seat and the trail camera footage replaying in my head. Victor Lane had not wandered onto the dam road by accident. Men do not drag boundary stakes at 2 a.m. unless somebody told them daylight was dangerous. By the time I reached the gate, the old white HOA sign was still bolted across the wood, but now there were orange flags beyond it. Fresh ones. They ran along the edge of my north pasture in a crooked line toward the dam road, each one stamped with black marker. HO, a drainage maintenance zone. I stopped the truck, got out, and photographed every flag before I touched anything. My grandfather's voice came back so clear, it almost made me turn around. "Do not argue at the gate." So I did not. I walked the full line, recording with my phone. The flags cut 30 yards into my pasture, crossed the low creek bed, and ended near the dam spillway that fed Silas's spring lake. If Silver Pines could claim that strip as a drainage zone, they could control the road, the water, and every access point between the ranch and the subdivision. That was not a mistake. That was the play. At 10 that morning, my phone started buzzing. First one message, then 5, then a dozen. Silver Pines had called an emergency community meeting. A neighbor had sent me the flyer. Protect our homes from Mercer Land Claim Emergency Board Session. Tonight, 7 p.m., Silver Pines Clubhouse. Below the headline was a photo of my truck at the gate. Cropped tight, made ugly, made threatening. By noon, the Facebook posts started. Marilyn wrote that I was attempting to destabilize the community's water and road access. Someone else called me a bitter heir. Another said men like me only showed up when they smelled money. I watched strangers talk about my grandfather's ranch like it was a disease spreading uphill. I wanted to answer every lie. Instead, I printed the posts, saved the screenshots, and added them to the folder. At 6:45, I parked across from the Silver Pines clubhouse. Warm light spilled from tall windows. Inside, people sat in rows, arms crossed, faces tight with fear Marilyn had planted there before I ever opened my mouth. She stood at the front in a cream blazer, pointing at a map projected on the wall. Not the county map, not Silas's map, her map. "The North Drainage Corridor is essential to the safety of 300 families," Marilyn said. "Mr. Mercer has threatened to block access, interrupt water flow, and challenge infrastructure that has served this community for decades. I stepped inside. The room turned. Marilyn smiled like she had been waiting. "Mr. Mercer, how brave of you to attend a members-only meeting. I came because you're showing my land on that screen." Murmurs moved through the room. Victor Lane sat at the board table, eyes fixed on his hands. I recognized the slope of his shoulders from the trail camera footage. Marilyn tapped the microphone. "This is exactly the hostility I warned you about." A man in the second row stood. "Are you trying to take our homes?" "No," I said. Marilyn cut in. "He filed documents today that suggest otherwise." "I filed nothing today," I said. "I requested records." Her jaw tightened. "Not much." "Enough." "You walked onto an active drainage zone," she said. "I walked my pasture. That pasture affects our community infrastructure. Then show them the recorded agreement that gives you control of it." The room quieted. Marilyn looked at me with cold precision. "This is not a courtroom." "No," I said. "But you're making claims like it is." A few residents looked at the screen again. The map suddenly seemed less solid than it had a minute before. Marilyn recovered fast. "The board will vote tonight on a temporary legal defense assessment. $300 per household, effective immediately, to protect residents from Mr. Mercer's reckless land grab." That got the room moving. Anger, fear, whispers, $300 per house because I asked for a deed. I looked at Victor Lane. "Did you move stakes on my land last night?" His head snapped up. Marilyn's voice cracked across the room. "That is a defamatory accusation. I have video." The room went silent. Victor's face drained. For 1 second, power shifted. Not fully. Not enough. But enough for Marilyn to feel the floor move beneath her. She struck the table with her palm. "This meeting is adjourned." People stood slowly, confused and angry. Some stared at me like I had lit a match in their living room. Others looked at Marilyn for answers she did not give. I left before she could turn the room back against me. When I reached the cabin, there was a woman standing on my porch. She was in her 70s, thin as fence wire, with a raincoat pulled tight and a manila folder held against her chest. Her eyes moved to the dark road behind me before she spoke. "Wade Mercer?" "Yes. My name is June Callahan. I taught school here 31 years. She held out the folder with both hands. "Your grandfather was not crazy," she said. "And Marilyn Price would kill to get this back." I brought June Callahan inside and locked the door behind her. She stayed near the kitchen table, eyes on the window, like she expected headlights to crawl up the ranch road any second. I set Silas's folder beside hers. Old paper met new paper, and somehow both carried the same kind of weight. "What is this?" I asked. 11 years of Silver Pines newsletters, board invoices, assessment notices, and meeting minutes Marilyn never wanted residents comparing. June tapped the folder. "I kept copies because I used to teach civics. Bad government leaves a trail." I opened the first stack. Land stabilization fee, $85 per household. Ground corridor safety assessment, $120 per household. Lake access preservation fund, $60 per household. Drainage rights administration, $95 per household. Every charge sounded official. Every line pointed back to the same thing. Silver Pines residents had been paying Maryland's HOA to maintain land corridors the HOA might not even control. "How many homes?" I asked. 312, June said, not counting the newer ridge lots. I did the math in my head and felt my jaw tighten. This was not a few fines on a clipboard. This was years of money pulled from families under the claim that Maryland was protecting their access to roads, water, drainage, and the lake trail. June slid another page across the table. Your grandfather came to a board meeting 8 years ago. He asked why they were collecting fees on Mercer ground. The page was a printed meeting summary. Near the bottom, one sentence had been underlined in blue ink. Mr. Silas Mercer was removed from the meeting after making disruptive and unsupported claims regarding ground ownership. I stared at it longer than I should have. They called him crazy, June said quietly. Marilyn laughed after he left. Said old men with fence posts think they own the horizon. Something cold moved through my chest. Silas had not died confused. He had died ignored. I took photos of every page, then called the number Sheriff Ralston had given me before leaving the ranch. Not the sheriff this time. The attorney. Nora Whitcomb answered on the fourth ring, voice clear and clipped. I told her my name, what I had found, and what Eli Booker had pulled from Book 42, page 318. She did not interrupt once. Then I emailed her the plat, the surface use agreement, the reversion clause, Victor Lane's trail camera footage, Marilyn's fine notice, and June's folder. 10 minutes later, she called back. Mr. Mercer, Nora said, do not speak to Marilyn Price again without recording it. Do not sign anything. Do not remove that HOA sign yet. That bad? That useful, she replied. They put their claim in writing. They collected fees on it. They moved stakes after you requested records. And if this agreement expired the way your surveyor says it did, then Marilyn Price has been hiding a serious title problem from her own residents. June closed her eyes like she had waited years to hear someone say it. What happens now? I asked. I file a quiet title action, Nora said. We ask the court to determine who controls the ground rights under the road, drainage basin, lake trail, utility corridor, and common parcels. We also request an injunction preventing the HOA from altering boundaries or blocking access. How fast? I can file tomorrow morning. The next morning became 5 hours later. At 8:06 a.m., Nora sent me a copy of the filed complaint. At 8:43, Marilyn's HOA email blasted every resident. Mercer claim threatens community access. Board pursuing emergency legal response. Residents may face temporary special assessment. By noon, my mailbox was full of angry messages from people I had never met. Some begged me not to take their road. Some cursed me for trying to destroy their homes. Marilyn had thrown a match into dry grass and let fear do the rest. At 3:17 p.m., a black SUV rolled through my gate. A man in a gray suit stepped out holding a sealed envelope. He was polished, calm, and expensive in a way that did not fit the dust on my driveway. Mr. Mercer, he said. Grant Hollis. I represent Silver Pines Homeowners Association. I kept my phone recording in my shirt pocket. He held out the envelope. My client would like to resolve these disputed historical ground interests before unnecessary panic spreads through the community. I looked at the envelope, then at his face. For the first time since Marilyn bolted that sign to my gate, I knew they were not trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to buy my silence. Grant Hollis stood in my driveway with that sealed envelope held between two fingers, like it was too clean to touch ranch dust. His black SUV idled behind him. The engine was smooth, expensive, and wrong against the sound of cattle moving beyond the fence. I did not take the envelope right away. What's in it? I asked. A settlement proposal, he said. Nothing hostile, though. My client wants to avoid unnecessary litigation. Your client called the sheriff on me. Misunderstandings happen around grief and inheritance. That was a lawyer's way of putting perfume on a threat. I took the envelope and opened it with my pocket knife. One page. Clean letterhead. A number in the middle that almost made me laugh. $75,000. In exchange, I would release all claims to disputed historical ground interests, waive objections to existing Silver Pines infrastructure, and agree not to contact residents regarding land title, drainage corridors, lake access, or road ownership. I read it twice, then looked at him. $75,000 for land you say I don't own. Grant's face did not change. It is a nuisance settlement. Then why does it include the lake trail, the drainage basin, the utility corridor, and the North Ridge Road? His jaw worked once. I stepped closer. Why would Marilyn Price pay me to sign away rights she told the whole community I never had? That question is exactly why these matters are better handled privately. Privately, I said. Like moving survey stakes at 2 a.m? That landed. Grant's eyes flicked toward the gate, then back to me. Mr. Mercer, I advise you to consider the offer seriously. Litigation will be expensive. Residents will be upset. Your grandfather's name could become part of a very public fight. My grandfather's name already is part of it. He slid a business card from his coat pocket. Call me when you've calmed down. I let the card fall into the dust. Grant looked at it, then at me, and for the first time his polished face showed irritation. You have 48 hours, he said. He got back in the SUV and backed down the ranch road. I waited until he passed the gate before I pulled the recorder from my shirt pocket and saved the file. Then I photographed the offer, scanned it, and sent it to Nora Whitcomb. Her reply came less than a minute later. Do not respond. This is better than I hoped. At dusk, I walked down to the gate to check the camera angle. The white HOA sign was still bolted across the wood, but now it looked different. Not like a warning, like evidence. That was when I saw the envelope. It had been tucked behind the lower hinge, half hidden in the shadow of the post. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in block letters. Wade Mercer. I looked up the road. Empty. Back inside the cabin, I opened it at the kitchen table with gloves on, because Nora's voice had already trained me to think like the paper mattered before the emotion did. Inside was a photocopy of a Silver Pines board memo. Private session. Ground exposure. Risk prepared for Marilyn Price confidential. My eyes moved down the page. There were references to the expired agreement, references to resident panic, references to containment language and discouraging Mercer inquiry. Then I saw the line near the bottom. If Mercer finds the subsurface clause, we lose the entire North Ridge. Marilyn's signature sat under it in blue ink. I sat very still. She knew. She had known before I opened Silas's box, before the sheriff, before the emergency meeting, before the fake drainage flags and the settlement offer. This was never a misunderstanding. It was a cover-up. I sent photos to Nora, then June Callahan. June called back immediately, whispering like someone else was in the room. Where did you get that? Anonymous. A long pause. Victor, she said. Victor Lane? He's scared. Marilyn makes people do things, then keeps the proof. If he sent that, it means the board is cracking. Outside, a hard wind moved over the pasture, rattling the cabin windows. I looked at the memo again, at Marilyn's signature, at the one sentence that changed everything. We lose the entire North Ridge. I thought about Grant's offer. $75,000 for silence. Cheap money for a woman trying to save roads, drainage, lake access, common land, and her own illegal house addition. The next morning, I woke to a low, mechanical rumble. Not thunder, diesel engines. I stepped onto the porch and saw dust rising near the gate. Orange concrete barriers were being dropped across my ranch road one by one. 2 men in yellow vests stood beside them. A private security truck blocked the entrance. And at the center of it all, Marilyn Price stood with her clipboard, watching them close my road. I did not run. I did not shout. I went back inside, picked up Silas's folder, slid the anonymous memo into the front pocket, and turned on the recorder in my phone. Then I drove down the ranch road slow enough for every camera to catch me. By the time I reached the gate, half the ridge had gathered on the Silver Pines side. Residents stood near SUVs and golf carts, whispering over coffee cups. They had been told I was dangerous. They had come to watch Marilyn stop me. A new sign stood beside the barriers, Emergency Community Route. Authorized residents only, unauthorized use subject to removal. Marilyn stepped forward before I killed the engine. "Mr. Mercer," she said loudly, making sure the crowd heard, "you are ordered to turn around. This route has been temporarily secured under Silver Pines Emergency Authority." I opened my door and stepped out with my hands visible. "This is my ranch road. This is a critical community access corridor. Then show the recorded authority." She smiled toward the residents. "He keeps repeating that phrase because he wants to frighten families with technicalities." "No," I said. "I keep repeating it because deeds matter." That stirred the crowd. A man near the front shouted, "Are you going to block our homes or not?" I looked at him. "No. Marilyn is." Her eyes flashed. "Do not twist this," she snapped. "You filed a hostile land claim against 300 families. I filed a quiet title action to find out who controls the ground. You're threatening water, roads, drainage, and emergency access. I'm protecting them from being controlled by someone who hid the lease expiration." The crowd went quiet in pockets. A few people looked at Marilyn. Most still looked scared. She pointed at my truck. "If you cross this barrier, I will have your vehicle seized as a public nuisance. You don't have seizure authority. I have board authority." On my side of the gate? That landed harder than she wanted. I called Sheriff Ralston on speaker. Marilyn watched me do it. "Sheriff," I said when he answered, "I'm at my ranch gate. Silver Pines has blocked my private road with concrete barriers." Marilyn raised her clipboard. "Tell him we are exercising emergency access control." Ralston's voice came through flat and tired. "Don't touch the barriers. I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, his cruiser rolled up with dust trailing behind it. He stepped out, looked at the barriers, the sign, the security truck, then Marilyn. "Mrs. Price," he said, "who authorized this?" "The board," she replied. "Court order?" "No." "County permit?" "This is HOA infrastructure." Ralston looked at me. "Mr. Mercer, you have your documents?" I lifted the folder. Before I could open it, another truck pulled in behind the sheriff. Eli Booker got out carrying a rolled plat map under his arm. Nora Whitcomb stepped out from the passenger side, black case in hand, face calm as stone. Marilyn saw Nora and stiffened. Nora walked straight to Ralston. "Sheriff, I filed the quiet title action yesterday. I also filed notice of the disputed ground rights and requested injunctive relief. Until the court rules, the HOA cannot alter access, move boundaries, or interfere with Mr. Mercer's use of his recorded property." Marilyn cut in. "That is your interpretation." Nora opened her case and handed Ralston a stamped copy. "That is the filing." Eli unrolled the original plat across the hood of Ralston's cruiser. The wind tugged at the edges until I pinned one corner with my hand. Eli placed a ruler along the old Mercer boundary and then along the modern Silver Pines road. "This barrier is on Mercer ground," he said. "So is the roadbed beneath it." The residents leaned in. Victor Lane stood near the security truck, pale and sweating. I looked at him. "Victor, did Marilyn order you to move my survey stakes?" Marilyn snapped. "Do not answer that." But Victor was done pretending. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "She told me it was temporary," he said. "She said we just needed the map to match the emergency filing until the court cooled down." The crowd erupted. Marilyn turned on him. "Victor." He stepped back like her voice had burned him. Ralston raised one hand. "Enough." Nora looked at Marilyn. "You moved boundary markers after receiving notice of a title dispute?" Marilyn's face had gone white beneath her makeup. For the first time since I met her, she had no polished answer. I looked past her at the families gathered in the dust. People who had been lied to. People who thought I had come to take their homes when all I had done was ask who owned the ground, beneath the road they drove every day. I could have pushed then. I could have demanded the barriers removed immediately. I could have made Marilyn watch the sheriff order her private security off my property. Instead, I stepped to the center of the road and spoke loud enough for everyone. "I could shut this road today, but I'm not here to punish families. I'm here to end the lie." No one moved. Even Marilyn stood silent. Then Sheriff Ralston turned to the security crew and pointed at the barriers. "Move them." The first barrier scraped across gravel with a sound that cut through the crowd. Nobody cheered. Nobody clapped. That was not the kind of victory you celebrate out loud. It was the kind that makes people look at the road under their feet and wonder who had been lying to them. Marilyn stood beside the security truck, stiff as a fence post, watching her authority get dragged away one orange block at a time. Nora leaned close to me. "Do not speak to her now. We have what we need." "What happens next?" "Court," she said. "And if Victor repeats what he just said under oath, Marilyn has a problem she cannot find her way out of." 3 days later, the county courtroom was packed. Silver Pines residents filled the benches. Some looked angry, some looked embarrassed. June Callahan sat behind me with both hands folded over her purse. Eli Booker waited near the aisle with a rolled plat map across his knees. Victor Lane sat 2 rows back from Marilyn, pale, sweating, and no longer looking at her. Marilyn arrived with Grant Hollis and 2 boxes of HOA binders. She wore navy instead of cream, her hair pulled back tight, every inch of her trying to look like order itself. The judge, Helen Ward, took the bench at 9 o'clock sharp. Nora stood first. "Your Honor, this matter concerns recorded ground rights, expired surface use agreements, and unauthorized interference with property controlled by the Mercer estate." Grant stood after her, smooth and calm. "Your Honor, Silver Pines has relied on continuous use of these roads, drains, and lake access routes for decades. Hundreds of families depend on them. Mr. Mercer's claim is disruptive, opportunistic, and unsupported by modern community practice." Modern community practice. That phrase sounded expensive and empty. Judge Ward looked down over her glasses. "Mr. Hollis, I asked for documents, not adjectives." A ripple moved through the room. Grant opened one binder. "We have HOA bylaws, community maps, maintenance records, fee schedules, and resident reliance documentation." "Do you have a recorded renewal of the Mercer surface use agreement?" the judge asked. Grant paused. Marilyn looked at him sharply. "No, Your Honor," he said. "But we contend renewal was implied through conduct." Nora rose with one sheet in her hand. "The original agreement requires written renewal recorded with the county. It does not allow implied renewal." She placed Silas Mercer's 1958 agreement on the evidence table. The courtroom seemed to shrink around that paper. Nora read the clause aloud, clean and slow. If renewal was not recorded within 60 days of expiration, all described surface improvements reverted to the Mercer estate for control, maintenance, or removal. Roads, drainage works, lake access paths, common maintenance parcels, utility corridors. Every word landed heavier than the last. Judge Ward turned to Eli. "Mr. Booker, you reviewed the county records?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Was a renewal recorded?" No, ma'am. Was the agreement still attached to the Mercer chain of title? Yes, ma'am. Are the disputed improvements located within the described corridor? Eli unrolled the plat. Yes, Your Honor. The North Ridge Road, the lake trail, the primary drainage basin, the clubhouse lawn edge, and the restricted utility corridor all overlap the Mercer Reservation. A low murmur rose from the benches. Marilyn whispered something to Grant. He did not answer her. Nora then played the trail camera footage. Victor Lane and two workers moved boundary stakes under the hard white glare of night vision. The courtroom watched in absolute silence. Victor was called next. He stood, raised his hand, and looked like a man carrying a weight he could no longer hold. Nora asked one question. Who instructed you to move those boundary markers? Victor swallowed. Marilyn Price. Marilyn stood halfway. That is a lie. Judge Ward's voice cracked through the room. Sit down, Mrs. Price. Marilyn sat. Nora's final exhibit was the anonymous memo. Grant objected. Nora produced metadata from the board packet Victor had surrendered that morning. The judge allowed it. Nora read the sentence aloud. If Mercer finds the subsurface clause, we lose the entire North Ridge. Then she showed Marilyn's signature. The room went still, not quiet. Still. Nora clicked to the final overlay. The 1958 Mercer Utility Corridor beneath the modern Silver Pines plat. A red rectangle marked Marilyn Price's house addition. Your Honor, Nora said, this illegal addition was built 5 years ago over a restricted Mercer utility corridor. No recorded permission, no easement, no Mercer consent. Every face turned toward Marilyn. For the first time since I had met her, she looked small. Judge Ward leaned forward. Mrs. Price, she said, did you know this agreement existed? Marilyn opened her mouth. No sound came out. And in that silence, my grandfather's old paper did what he never got to do in life. It made them listen. Judge Ward gave Marilyn one more chance to answer. Marilyn looked at Grant Hollis, but he had already closed his binder. That was the moment I knew her power had left the room before she did. I relied on board counsel, she said. Grant's head snapped up. Your Honor, I need to clarify that my firm was retained after the dispute began. We did not advise Mrs. Price regarding the original ground agreement, boundary markers, or construction over the Mercer corridor. Marilyn turned on him. Grant. He did not look at her. Judge Ward wrote something on her pad, then looked back at the room. The court finds the Mercer estate holds controlling ground rights under the North Ridge Road, lake access trail, drainage basin, clubhouse edge parcel, and restricted utility corridor. The HOA is enjoined from interfering with Mr. Mercer's access, altering markers, collecting fees tied to disputed ground corridors, or representing ownership not supported by recorded documents. The words moved through the courtroom like a wind shift before a storm. Nora stood beside me, still and focused. Judge Ward continued. The court also refers the evidence regarding falsified boundary markers, unauthorized fees, and possible intimidation to the county attorney. Marilyn's face changed then. Not anger, not arrogance. Calculation. Stripped naked by fear. Victor Lane lowered his head. Behind me, June Callahan made a sound that was almost a sob. The judge's final ruling came 2 weeks later in writing. Clean, direct, brutal for Marilyn. Silver Pines had no active renewal, no permanent easement over the disputed corridors, no right to block my road, no right to charge residents land stabilization fees tied to Mercer ground. Marilyn was removed from HOA authority pending investigation, and the board was ordered to preserve every record. By sundown that day, the white HOA sign was gone from my gate. I took it down myself after Nora told me the injunction was recorded. I did not smash it. I did not burn it. I carried it to the barn and leaned it against the wall beside Silas's old broken fence posts. Some lies deserve to be kept, just long enough to remember how they sounded. The next part could have been ugly. Legally, I could have charged back rent. I could have shut the lake trail. I could have forced Silver Pines to remove structures from Mercer ground. I could have become exactly what Marilyn told everyone I was. But I kept thinking about the people standing in that road dust. Families who bought homes in good faith. Kids who fished the lake trail. Retirees who paid fees because a woman with a clipboard told them fear was cheaper than fighting. So Nora drafted a settlement. No evictions, no road closure, no punishment for innocent homeowners. Silver Pines residents would be allowed to buy clean ground rights under the affected corridors through a long-term payment plan. Illegal fees tied to the ground corridors were canceled. The new temporary board, led in part by June Callahan, agreed to open the books and refund what they could recover. Marilyn Price and the Inner Circle, who approved false filings, would face restitution claims separately. The old Spring Lake and 300 acres of untouched ridge became the Silas Mercer Nature Preserve. That part mattered most. At the dedication, June stood beside me while a small crowd gathered near the lake trail. No speeches about victory. No cheering for Marilyn's downfall. Just a wooden sign, clean letters, and the sound of water moving over the spillway Silas had kept clear with his own hands. Sheriff Ralston came too. He shook my hand and looked toward the ridge road. "You could have buried them," he said. "I know. Why didn't you?" I looked at the families walking the trail, then at the preserve sign bearing my grandfather's name. "Because my grandfather protected land," I said. "Not grudges." A month later, Marilyn's house addition was marked for removal from the restricted utility corridor. I saw her once after that, outside the courthouse, carrying a cardboard box of files while 2 investigators walked behind her. She did not look like a queen anymore. She looked like someone finally feeling the weight of ground she never owned. She saw me across the steps. For a second, I thought she might say something. She didn't. That was enough. Months passed. The ranch changed slowly, the way honest things do. I repaired the cabin roof, rebuilt the north fence, cleared the dam road. The cattle came back to the pasture, and the lake trail reopened under rules everyone could read, not rules one woman invented. Sometimes at sunset, I stood by the wooden gate and looked down toward Silver Pines. The houses were still there. The road still carried families home. The lake still caught the last light. Only the lie was gone. Silas's survey box sits on my kitchen table now. His 1958 plat is framed above it. In the bottom corner, his handwriting is still sharp enough to cut. Surface use is not ground ownership. People think land is quiet. It is not. Land keeps records, fence lines, water paths, old roads, agreements men sign and forget. Promises buried under fresh pavement and perfect lawns. Marilyn Price built her kingdom on stolen certainty. My grandfather built his on paper, patience, and truth. In the end, hers collapsed. His waited. Truth did not shout. It waited in a dusty survey box until the right man came home. His waited.
There is something steady and old-fashioned about that. A man can be raving, tired, and looked down on, and still choose discipline. He can be angry and still stay decent. He can have the power to hurt innocent people and still decide that justice should protect families, not punish them for someone else's wrongdoing. That is what makes this story matter. It was not just about an HOA sign coming up raised. It was about dignity being restored and grandfather being believed and a piece of Wyoming land finally speaking through the record that had been there all along. If you would have stood your ground the same way we did, type yes in the comments. And if you have ever dealt with an HOA, a bad neighbor, or somebody who thought paperwork did not matter, rub the word justice. And if story like this speaks to you, subscribe and stay with us. There's more HOA, range, lake, and plant story coming. The kind where patient tools and quiet courage still count for something.